to set recording going now. Good, we're recording. So thank you all for joining. I know there's been a lot of questions around clarification over some of the points we mentioned previously, and we've had some of the guidance coming through now. So what we're going to do, we'll try and keep this short and sweet and answer as many questions as possible. So I'm just going to run through a few points for you guys first of all to recap what we know and any bits we don't know still. So just 5 or 10 minutes, and then I'm going to go over to Q&A. So at the bottom you can start putting questions in chat as and when you like, some of which we might cover off. Some people are here live or not here live and send through questions as well, so I'll read through those and cover bits. And if you're on the call live, we'll just unmute you. If you've got a question, we can talk to you guys. So just to recap what we already know, and I think looking at the participant list, I think it's pretty clear that nearly everyone on here is in the same sort of situation. So we're running this Q&A today specifically for those of you operating through limited companies, so not self-employed, and for the vast majority of you, you're the only person in the company, or perhaps a spouse as well. So the first thing is, for those of you that are VAT registered, you don't need to make this next VAT payment. So you can automatically defer the VAT payments that are due up until the 30th of June. There's no need to apply for that. You just don't make the payment, or you cancel your direct debit if it's already set up. It will become due. You've got until next year, so you've got a year to pay that back, but you don't have to make that payment. So for any of you struggling, the first thing to do is to make sure you've got your VAT direct debit cancelled, or you just don't make the payment. We still need to make the submission. So Harry and Ryan will still be sending out a submission for you guys and getting it submitted. That's important, but we just don't do the payment. For the other taxes, so specifically for corporation tax and PAYE, if you are struggling to pay those, then HMRC have an extended time to pay helpline. So you'll need to phone that helpline, explain that you're struggling, and then come to a payment arrangement that's bespoke for everyone with HMRC directly about spreading that payment out over future months, weeks, whatever it may be. So there is the potential there to delay payment for corporation tax and PAYE, but it's not automatic. You do need to apply for it. So that's important. For self-assessment, those of you who have tax due on your self-assessment return, you'd normally, or for some of you, would be making payment on accounts in July. So they again are automatically deferred. So no payment on accounts in July. They're going to become due the 31st of January 21. Again, no action needed there. Just don't make the payment. That's an automatic deferral. So that covers off the taxes. So that's fairly straightforward. In terms of the support that you can get, so I, along with a lot of other professionals, was very surprised that you guys were excluded from the self-employment scheme. A lot of us really did think that you'd fall under that category and you would be treated as such. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case, and you've been explicitly excluded from the self-employment scheme. So if you're using a limited company, there is no way the self-employment scheme is any use to you whatsoever. So we'll leave that there and we won't discuss that any further on this call to keep things clear. So really the only potential scheme that's available to you is the job retention scheme, and that's the one for employees and employers. So the scheme is in place to help employers pay their employees if they couldn't do any work for them at all. So the technical term that you'll see bandied around a lot that nobody had ever heard of before was furloughed. So if you furlough your staff or yourself, it means effectively that you're not doing any work whatsoever for the business, and the government will reimburse 80% of your wages per month. Can be backdated to the 1st of March if that's when you stopped, and at the moment the scheme is for 3 months, up to the end of May. It may get extended beyond that, but that's the date it ends at the moment. And yeah, so you can get 80% of your wages back. So a big thing for you guys is, obviously for a long time it's been common advice, and we've been doing the same, to take a smaller salary and most of your money is dividends, because that is and still is a very tax efficient way of extracting money from the limited company. Unfortunately, when it comes to this government support, dividends are not included whatsoever. So any income you get as dividends, there's no way that there'll be any scheme around at the moment that will support you in terms of reimbursing you for the dividends that you'd normally have. The government seemed pretty clear on that, so I doubt that's going to change at all. So what that leaves for the majority of you is potentially 80% of the wage that you put through payroll. So some of you have different wages, but for the vast majority of you, your monthly wage is going to be £719 in the current tax year we're in. So potentially you could claim back 80% of that, so £575. So if you were furloughed, so you had no work to do for March, April and May, then potentially you've got £1,700 worth of money that you can reclaim from the government there. The really tricky bit is what furloughing means. So if you're an employee, it's easy. You don't do any work. You can't do any work whatsoever. You're furloughed. That's it. Your employer will pay you. For you guys as directors, there's a much trickier grey area in between. How can a company keep operating if its only director is furloughed? So we have some clarification around that, but not full clarification. So the Treasury have come out and said that directors are not excluded from this scheme. So you can be included on this scheme, but they raise the point that you do need to not be working. What they have done, though, is clarify that there's a difference between your director responsibilities, so your statutory responsibilities, and those of your employment responsibilities. So, for example, things like making sure accounts are filed on time and company's house is kept up to date and stuff like that, they class as your statutory responsibilities, and they don't, and they can still be performed while you're furloughed. The much grayer area is around sort of trying to get work and marketing yourself and stuff like that. Outright marketing activities, in my mind, would be classed as work, so you wouldn't be able to do those. But I have, I will bring it up just to remind myself and quote myself. But in the company's house guidance about what is a director's responsibility, one of the things that crops up there is promote the success of the company. So this guidance is guidance legally for a director. It wasn't meant for this purpose, so you do have to take this with a pinch of salt. But listed within that, there are things like maintaining supplier and customer relationships. So there's going to be a very grey area and a fine line between what counts as your statutory responsibility and what counts as employment. If you're going out there and marketing yourself, probably employment, and you can't do that while you're furloughed. If you are just sort of winding things down, and for those of you that are contractors, if you're genuinely not working and you're not even actively looking for contracts, then essentially I think you're probably okay to furlough yourself. I would point out this is opinion. There is no facts on this. It is much more of an HR legal question than it is a tax or accounting question. The Treasury have gone out of their way to say that directors can use this scheme. So I do believe that they're not trying to find ways to exclude you guys from it. I do believe that their intention is for you guys to use it if there genuinely isn't anything for you to do. It's just there's a lot of grey area around that. And we probably need some further guidance for some of you who sort of fall in the middle ground there. If you're really not doing anything at all, and I know a couple of you have already emailed us and said, there's no contracts, I'm not even going to bother looking, you're just keeping the accounts filed, for example, then you're probably going to be okay. If you're doing other admin and stuff, probably not. So there is one further point that I'll make on that. Obviously, that's quite a negative thing for you, a lot of you guys. Whether either you can claim for this scheme, and if you can, the amount you can claim is pretty small, unfortunately. But the one point I would make on this is it could potentially help you in the longer run. So when the Chancellor announced the self-employment scheme, he very nastily, in my opinion, hinted pretty strongly at the fact that self-employed individuals want help from the government the same as employed individuals, so why should they pay different tax? So for me, that very clearly sets out this government's intention further down the line to raise the taxes on self-employed people and bring it in line with employment taxes. If he had done the same for you guys as contractors through limited companies and brought you in and said, yes, you can use this scheme, your IR35 argument, i.e. that you're not treated the same as employees, would have gone out the window instantly. You would have lost that argument. IR35 would have essentially been fully brought in as it was intended to be very recently. And frankly, you'd have a really hard time, anyone arguing you're outside of IR35. So potentially, this could be used to fight the IR35 argument further down the line. Looking for small wins here, but that is something that's being banded around in our circles at the moment, that maybe, just maybe, this is a good sign, because how can the government truly argue that you're treated the same as employees when they supported employees, they supported self-employed individuals, but the limited company contractors were ignored? So very opinionated, that part, very little fact to back that up, but that's kind of where we're at the moment. Before we move on, Harry, Ryan, do you think there's anything else we need to cover before we go into the questions?
I think you've covered a lot of stuff there, so very good.
Great. Okay, so we'll fire over questions. We've got a lot that have already come through, some of which I may have already answered. So let me just bring up some of the questions. We've got Darren. I think Darren's on the call. Let me just see. Unmute.
Yep.
Hi, Darren.
Hello.
Hi there.
Morning,
you
Darren.
Some questions beforehand, didn't you?
Yeah.
Do you want me to recap those in case you can't remember, or do you want to ask them now? Or?
I think these just what. So you went over the stuff about statutory duties. So if you're just filing accounts and you're not actually working, then you could be classed within the job retention scheme. So the only other question I think I had was around the calculation of the 80% under the GRS.
Oh yeah, that was right.
Yeah. So yeah, go on.
So the guidance is that it's based on February's pay. So essentially, there's nothing that can be done either way to change what the 80% is, because you've already filed February's payroll. The way the payroll scheme works is that automatically goes to HMRC straight away. So
right, okay.
They already have a record of what your February pay is. So it doesn't matter what happens in March or past that point. It will be based on 80% of your February payroll. The only exception to that is if you had a variable pay, and there's very few directors that will do, but I know some accountants will operate an annual payroll scheme where they'll put no pay through from month 1 to 11 and all of it through in month 12.
Right.
So if you're on a variable pay scheme, as long as you're employed for more than 12 months, then there's things that can be done around either the average for this current tax year or taking this month's equivalent for last year. So if you're on an annual payroll scheme, you're okay. If you're on a consistent monthly payroll, which virtually all of our clients on this call will be, then it's just based on 80% of February's pay.
Right, cool.
Any other questions?
No, that's it, thanks.
Great. Okay, I'm just going to mute you back up and bring in the next one. We had some questions that come through about names, so I'll just whiz through these. So is it just salary I get support on? Yes, unfortunately, dividends are not included, so just 80% of your salary. How do I apply the job retention scheme? Will you do it for me? Okay, so some practical issues around how the scheme works. You still make the payroll submission as normal. If you're paying employees, you can choose to pay them either 80% and get the full refund back from government, or you could pay the 100% and the government will just give you the 80% and you top up the 20%. If you're talking about yourself, it is worthwhile doing the 100% in our opinion and just claiming back the 80% because it's going to you anyway. What happens is you run payroll in the normal way. HMRC are building a system and a mechanism for us to be able to upload information about who's been furloughed, over what period, what were the amounts and what are we claiming back, and then they'll process that and send it back to you as a bank transfer into your account. So that's the mechanism for doing that. In terms of if we're going to be doing that or not, we will issue further guidance once we know exactly what's involved about who will be doing what and what needs to happen for that. So we don't quite know the ins and outs of that yet, so bear with us, but we will obviously clarify that shortly. And another point on time frame, they expect that system to be up and running by the end of April. So hopefully that's the time frame. So by the end of April, that mechanism will be there to allow you to submit claims to HMRC for the grant money, and it will come back to you directly. You still run payroll and pay salaries in the normal way. What action do I need to take if I can't make the July payment on account? So that's self-assessment. So we covered that. No action needed. You just don't make the payment. Will we prepare this year's tax self-assessments as a priority? So we've already had this chat internally about speeding these up. There is no, for those of you in a limited company, you don't need the self-assessment to help you claim any of this grant refund. So it doesn't have any direct bearing on being able to claim government support. And even if you were self-employed, it's not based on this current tax year anyway. So we will be working to get self-assessment up much sooner this year, but it won't be needed for any support schemes here. Are dividends including support? No. Can I claim because my contract has ended? So yes, the guidance says that if your employees or yourself as a director can't work because you're affected by the COVID-19 situation, then yes, essentially you can furlough yourself, subject to the criteria we already mentioned. We've got Dan, who I don't think is live on the call, sent through some questions, so we'll ask these. Dan says, I have invoiced my customer for March and they have now paid it. I only work till Friday the 13th of March. I'm not going to work again till July. Can I furlough from this date? So yes, the furloughing can be from any date. It can be backdated to the 1st of March if you didn't work from the 1st of March. And it doesn't have to be for a whole month. So in Dan's situation where he said he stopped working on the 16th of March, he would just be furloughed from the 16th of March. And essentially what he would get back is 80% of his prorated salary for the second half of the month, effectively. So from the date when he stopped working. How much can we claim? 80%. As a company, do we have to pay this 80% back, grant back to the government? So no, these grants are not loans. They are grants, so they aren't refundable. They won't be due back to the government. They will be taxable, so they get treated like your sales do, in that they'll be subject to corporation tax. They won't be subject to VAT, but they will be subject to CT. So they don't need to be repaid, but they're treated like a sale essentially coming in, excluding VAT. Another question in here. I've already paid my wage for March, but see that claims can be backdated to the 1st of March. Would I be ineligible to claim for March because of this? Or can I repay the money back into the business account maybe? So yeah, so to clarify on that point, the payroll is a slightly separate issue. So you can still run payroll, you can still pay yourself, that's fine. Separately, we will, or you will, whoever will submit a claim to HMRC via this new system they're building and get that back as a grant. The employer, so yourself, still needs to be processing payroll and still needs to be paying it in theory to the employee. So that's important. We don't change the way we're running payroll, the way you're paying payroll. We just make a separate claim back, not through the PAYE system. Kester, let's unmute you. Hi Kester, you there?
Hello mate, how are you?
Yeah, good to hear from you. You had a question, didn't you? Do you want to just read it out?
Yeah, so basically my business is managing contractors that work in communal areas and apartments and things like that. We're only working on emergencies at the moment as per the government guidelines. But that's reduced my work by 90 to 95%. Obviously, I can't furlough myself because of that, so I didn't know if there's any other kind of help the government would give.
Unfortunately, mate, you fall into the supposedly 5% that the government's quoted of people that aren't helped by any of these schemes. So you're in the situation where, as a director, you've still got some work to do, so you can't possibly furlough yourself. You've got to keep going and keep what small business you can run in, but you can't claim on any of the government support schemes. So not the answer I wanted to give you, but yeah, unfortunately there's nothing there whatsoever to help. And as you sort of pointed out, for a lot of you, if you're running that 719 payroll through salary through payroll, if you can furlough yourself, you're going to get back £575 a month. Some of you have got to think about whether that's the right thing to do, or whether you might be able to make more than that by just doing a little bit of work and not furloughing yourself. So, Kessler, you probably fall into that category where you, although you've had a massive hit, you can still get some income in, even if it's massively reduced, and therefore not claim under the scheme. The only alternative you would have, which is not what I'm suggesting, to be clear, but the only alternative you would have would be to basically temporarily shut down the business, and only then could you claim 80% of your salary. But obviously that has massive implications in the longer run.
Yeah, sure. So, all right, thank you, mate. Appreciate it.
No problem. Sorry about that.
It's all right.
Okay, that's the end of my questions over here. So I know questions have been coming in chat, so just bear with me. I'm just going to hop through. is there any guidance? So Steve, is Steve on the call? Just unmute people. It's better. Yeah, right. I'm going to unmute you, Steve. Bear with me. Oh, I've just muted you again. Apologies. Hi, Steve.
How you doing?
Good.
Hey,
Thank
Steve.
you. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad.
So you asked about guidance on how they will check.
Well, in terms of furloughing yourself, what, if anything, has the government said on how they will check how much you're furloughed? You know, if I do some marketing and
Yeah.
who's gonna know?
I think obviously I've seen this question posed already. They haven't explicitly stated what they will do. What they have said already is that they will have mechanisms to follow this up. Sort of, it's very unlikely they're going to put any effort into following this up while it's ongoing. But when things start to return to some normality for them, this is a huge amount of money. Admittedly, most of you on this call are not benefiting much, but in terms of the wider economy, a huge amount of money they're pumping out. They will police this after the situation. So they issue something called a spotlight. HMRC issue a spotlight newsletter every so often, once a month or once a quarter, and that goes out to agents as accountants. And the spotlight issues are what they are saying they are going after for tax avoidance, tax evasion, all the rest of it. So any schemes they've seen set up that they disagree with and all of that sort of stuff. And in the latest spotlight issue, they started to touch on this exact issue and saying that they will have mechanisms in place to go and check. So I think they're kind of expecting people to self-govern and self-police this, but do be very wary about the fact that they will be going back and checking this stuff. I mean, anything that's out in the public domain, they will check. I know already of an employee, not a director, not a client, but an employee, a friend of mine, who has been furloughed, and his boss straight away on day one started sending him through work to do. And frankly, it's a slightly different situation for you guys as directors, but for an employer to do that to an employee, frankly, is completely immoral and against the intention of the scheme. So I think, like I said, there is a grey area around marketing and stuff like that, and whether I don't even know whether they're going to clarify that, frankly, because it's not a technical tax point. It's sort of in employment law and legal side of things. So we might get some guidance on what classes is what can be done under furlough and what may not be able to be done, but we might not do. It might just have to be open to everyone else to interpret what's there.
Right. Okay.
And you asked another question about the
well, there was one I'd actually sent through to Harry, which was, is it worth even considering changing the directorship of the company to someone who then doesn't take a wage so that they can be furloughed, and then I could do the admin not as a director, but as a sort of just not involved in the company, so it doesn't. So I can essentially, I'm trying to find a way to keep running, and obviously, if I do marketing and get work, then I'm not going to furlough myself. But in terms of marketing and trying to get work and then not getting anything, what I'm looking for is a fallback position.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's not there. Unfortunately, I think they are very clear in that you really can't do anything. So your first point about putting another director in place, I think that was something that I saw bounded around, and that potentially had legs. But in my eyes, that's not needed now, because the idea was having another director to perform the statutory duties, because essentially someone had to do them. But they have ruled statutory duties out of the furloughing scheme, so that's different. What you're talking about, marketing, is very different, and I think my interpretation would be that definitely counts as work that doesn't fall under the sort of keeping things ticking over from a statutory point of view. So you've essentially got the two options, and that's what I touched on when I was talking to Kester, in that you either sort of completely shut everything down and you're going to get no business coming in, risk the business further down the line and just get the 80% of your salary, or you forego that and you try and get work coming in. Hopefully that will be more than the 80% of the salary going forward, and even if it's not, hopefully that will pay dividends further down the line.
Okay, and the last one was, essentially the Sybil's loan, the 0% interest. is it worth applying for whatever the minimum amount is just to have it in the bank should you need it?
They are very tricky to get. Massive waiting lists. Some of the main banks are not helping anyone that doesn't bank with them because they've got big waiting lists. The minimum amount you can get is 25k, and essentially you have to have a really good business model in place anyway. And you can't just sort of say, unlike these schemes that are designed to help people that have got no income coming in because of COVID-19, the loan scheme is very different. It's sort of, we've still got a really good business. We can prove we're still going to have a really good business. We're just in a very temporary dip. So it's a very different situation to what most businesses actually find themselves in. And even then we're seeing, okay, the main banks have actually backed away from that, but they were asking for huge personal guarantees. I just think that for the vast majority of people on this call, it's just not going to be a practical route to go down. I just don't think you're going to qualify or be able to get it, unfortunately.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
No worries. Cheers, Steve. Right, let me just find the next question. So we had, okay, Gary said, thank you, you're welcome. Nasir, are you on the call? Yes, you are. Hi, Nasir, you've unmuted, mate.
Hi, Luke. How you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine, thanks. Just wondering what the turnaround time will be if we did apply for the 80%. I know it's not much, but it's something. If we did sort of apply today, what would the turnaround time be?
Well, the issue is that you can't apply today because there isn't a process built to do so yet. So the guidance they've given on timing is that the system will be available by the end of April. It's a very vague statement. I don't think they've actually clarified how much longer from when the system opens to payments coming out, but I think that will be a fairly quick turnaround. They need to build the system to allow you to submit the claim first of all. So we've got to wait for that to come in. End of April, my guess is they won't be on time, so I'd probably expect beginning of May. So I'd probably expect at least another month before anyone actually sees any cash out of this scheme from now.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. Cheers, Nasir.
Cheers.
Right, just go to the next question. Steve, we covered you. John, so where are you, John? I'm just going to unmute you, John. Hi, John.
Hi there. Morning,
Morning,
everyone.
John. Morning.
Yeah, I'm not sure what I'm going to do about this yet. I mean, the situation with me is that I'm working with a private sector company who does some work for a public sector client of theirs, and that just happens to be the NHS. And my line of work is I'm quality assuring the pensions work that this private company does. And because the NHS are busy with other things at the moment, they've deprioritised all the pensions activities. So that means that my quality assurance work has dropped off the radar for probably 3 months. So I've got a choice here. I can either just sit and wait for the call and resume my work in 3 months' time, or I can start to look for something else. If I just do the first thing, just wait for their call, then I'm effectively not operating, and I think we have a valid claim under this scheme. But am I right in thinking that I can continue, I think you mentioned, continue to run a payroll and pay yourself for a payroll, and then you're effectively claiming 80% of that salary back? But does the same thing, I know we can't claim the dividends back, but can you continue to pay yourself dividends during the period that you're going to claim the furlough for?
Yes, I would say yes. So I would say, so what happens with it's a little bit weird when it's your own company. You don't tend to formally go through this process as such, but essentially it's a director's responsibility and duty to decide when a dividend is paid to its shareholders. So for you and most others on this course, you are the same, one and the same. I would be of the opinion that deciding to pay yourself a dividend and processing that would fall under your statutory duties. So I don't necessarily see a problem with that, to be perfectly honest. So, and from a technical accounting point of view, yes, absolutely, you can still do that. So you can pay out dividends, you can take directors' loans from your company if need be, and obviously we can still run the payroll and keep you through that. So I think if you were meeting the furlough criteria, not working, then that should be fine. The other thing I would raise a point, actually, you didn't specifically ask it, but relating to your situation, if you're furloughed, you have to be furloughed for 3 weeks minimum. So you can't have sort of be furloughed for like a couple of days and then suddenly get some work. You would count as not furloughed and you wouldn't be tied to the scheme. Once you go over that 3 weeks, if at any point you decide to come back and start looking for work and take work on, then you can take yourself off. So you don't need to be furloughed for the whole of the 3 months or anything like that. It's just a minimum of 3 weeks consistently.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much for that.
No problem. Cheers, John.
Cheers, John.
Bye.
Right, so let's go through. Where are you? Adam. Oh, there you go. Hi, Adam.
Hi, mate. Yeah, it's
Hi, Adam.
how you doing, Ryan, mate?
Yeah, good.
A quick one, mate. As you can see, obviously, so the scheme is going to be up and running end of April, I think you said.
Yeah.
Is that the retention scheme?
Yes. Yeah.
So are they so to furlough yourself and the retention scheme? Is that the same thing?
Yeah. So the job retention scheme is the name of the scheme.
Okay. Yeah. Within that scheme, you furlough yourself.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
That's all I want to know, it really, basically.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's confusing, and the terminology is not anything that anyone's used to, including us. It's all new terminology.
Yeah, cool. So end of April, if you're out of work, you can furlough yourself, and you can basically gain back your salary, which is not a lot, as you said.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
You can still pay yourself dividends and whatnot.
Yeah, that's separate. You won't be able to claim those back, but there's nothing.
No. So
there's nothing to stop you doing that. There's no conditions around the scheme. The way the government see dividends, they don't see it related to employment. They see it as a benefit of investment.
Yeah.
So the way that you guys structure yourself, it kind of is obviously directly dictated by your employment. But traditionally, dividends come from shares that you invest. So they see it as investment income, which is completely separate to all the employment stuff.
Okay.
Right. Cheers, Adam.
Cheers, Adam.
So we've got Alex. Let's see if Alex is on the call. Yes, he is. Hi, Alex. I'm coming over to you. Hi, Alex.
Hi, yeah.
Hi,
Sorry, can you
Alex.
hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hi. Oh, hi. Sorry. I did miss the early part of the conversation. Sorry about the salary claim. So it is just the salary and free agent which I'm looking at, and that's where we're going to get it back. Simply, that's it.
Yeah.
I've captured all the other stuff which everybody's been talking to you about, so I get that now. So that's it. End of questions from me.
No problem. That's all right. Yeah, essentially, just to clarify, it's just the 8% of whatever amount of payroll was put through for February.
Cool. And I'm sort of looking at this. So there's nothing. So I'm looking at that, and there's no uplift of that or anything from the accounts or dividends. Okay. So
no, yeah, unfortunately, it's just that. So you may have a different level of salary, but most people on this call had £719.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So if you are furloughed, then you're going to be entitled to up to £575 per month while you're on that furloughed scheme.
Right, it's better than nothing, isn't it? So
well, yeah, and it's a vast drop for obviously the vast majority of you, but at least it's potentially there for you to be used. You just need to be careful to be making sure you're not doing anything other than your statutory duties.
So how's this going to impact all our corporation tax at the end? Because obviously we're going to be eating into this. I guess a number of people on the if this goes on for any longer than 6 months or so.
Well, maybe a little bit. So the 20% would eat into your profits that you built up potentially, but the income coming in is classed as taxable for corporation tax purposes. So the 80% coming in will be offset by the 80% of your salary that you're paying.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So it's only that 20% element that will be eating into any profits you've got there. So that'll be decreasing your corporation tax as we go through.
Okay, I'll be in touch with you about that in more detail.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, but I think just keep a close eye on free agent and how your liabilities are building up as we go through.
Cool. All right, that's great. Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
No problem.
Thanks,
Alex. We've got Stephen's got a question. Let me just find Stephen. Here we are. Hi, Stephen.
Oh, hi there.
Hi there.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. You had a question?
I've got a ringing tone on the phone now. So my question is, can we claim additional expenses for working from home? I'm in the fortunate position of being able to work from home. But I know I'm trying to find that in free agent. I know there's an expense I do claim. Is there anything additional that we can claim?
Yes, potentially. We've got a specific working from home guide, which is the best thing to send you over. So you've got two options. You've got the small, easily claimable allowance, which is a monthly allowance that we put through, or there's a slightly more structured arrangement that you can do that will allow you to claim more costs and expenses. So Ryan or Harry will ping that over to you afterwards, and if you've got any questions once you read through it, just let them know.
Okay, thanks.
No worries. Cheers, Stephen.
Cheers.
Right, so Alex has just asked for the work from home guide as well.
Yeah, fine. I'll make sure that goes out to everyone, to be fair.
Yeah, as I say, in fact, I think everyone that's on the call will just get the link to that sent over to all of you anyway. So
yeah,
I'm going to follow up this email with a recording. We'll get that over to all of you along with the work from home guide for those of you that are able to work rather than the furloughing scheme. So unless any of you got any questions, or Harry or Ryan, anything I missed off at all need to cover?
No, I think you covered most things, mate, to be fair, and I think the questions coming in are generally what's being asked across the board. So yeah, hopefully we've covered it off for a lot of people here.
Okay, great. So unfortunately, not the best of news. At least there is potentially something some of you can claim. And like I said, there is still a grey area about whether you could actually class as furlough depending on what work you're doing. If you fully shut down everything and you're just keeping the accounts ticking over, you're probably okay. If you're marketing, you're probably not. And somewhere in between, we don't know yet, frankly. Frankly, I don't expect much more news from the government now, or major news from the government in terms of support schemes. I think they're probably supporting those who they plan to now, and they probably won't do much more. We'll just have to wait and see. We might get bits of guidance coming through, but essentially, I think everyone now should be of the sort of mindset that this is where we're at, this is what we're getting, this is how it works, and then creating a plan based on that. If anything changes, we'll let you know. We can do more of these Zoom calls if anything comes in or anyone finds this useful. But to be honest, I think it's just a case of just answering your questions as we process through the schemes now and start to get back what you can. I just encourage all of you to keep in touch with Ryan and Harry about your situation and where you're at and what's changing, and therefore we can just keep you abreast of all the information that's coming over. Also, we're doing our best to get the information out. We know that sometimes some of our emails are going in your junk and spam, so just a reminder just to keep checking those, please, just so you can get these emails coming through. It's really important that you'll all see our updates that come through. Lovely. Right, okay, we'll leave that there then, guys. Thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, everyone.
And
cheers, Luke.
speak to you guys again soon.